This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Squarespace is a wonderful platform to build your own sites with hundreds of templates to choose from, all the way from podcasts to online shops. Their powerful features such as email campaigns, collecting donations, social sharing, member areas, and blogging tools provide all you need to freely manage your ventures and grow as a brand. On top of that, their analytics tools will help you gain powerful insights into who's visiting your site and how they're interacting with your content, which is one of creators and marketeers' most valuable assets. Head to squarespace.com/MelReads to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain using code MelReads. That was hot. Hello, recruiting friends. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Hello. I know this is a different setup. We're currently in my office area, but today I have a super special video for you guys, and it is a video that I've been looking forward to making ever since the year kind of ended or was approaching its end. I mean, 2021. We're already in 2022, Mel. This shit gets confusing. However, what's important here is that last year I did a video that a lot of you guys seemed to like at the time, which is tier ranking every book I read in 2020. This year around, I was also planning the same thing, so tier ranking every book that I read in 2021, except for the fact that I read over 170 books. And tier ranking all of that is not only an incredibly daunting task, but it would also be an extremely long video that I'm sure nobody would be interested in seeing. However, I have come with an alternative, and that is me tier ranking every fantasy and sci-fi that I read in 2021. What was most interesting out of everything was figuring out the ratio of fantasy / non-fantasy that I read last year, and it came up at a whopping over 120 books that I read last year that were not fantasy or sci-fi. And I call myself a fantasy reader. But without further ado, let's set up on the desk, let's switch angles, and let's get started with a nice little screen recording. This lighting will be the bane of my existence. So literally, unless I talk like that, you are going to see ring lights in my eyes, and I don't pretend to talk like this for the entirety of the video. So you're gonna stare at my beautiful side profile as I tier rank some stuff. For the names of the tiers, I have 5. At the very bottom, we've got, ooh, she messy. With that voice. It comes with that voice, okay? The next tier is, they tried, if anything. Tier number 3 is, did we need this? And then at number 4, we've got Piquito with a smirk, and also with that voice, Piquito. So if you don't speak Spanish, basically Piquito means smooth. At the very top, we've got I'd kill for you. These may change as I go. I'm gonna try my best to be objective here, although this entire thing is subjective. However, the very first book we are tier ranking today is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. Now, you guys know, if you watched my best books of 2021, this book did make it into the list. I have been raving about Amari for the entirety of 2021 and also in the beginning of 2022. And I absolutely adored this. I loved the world building. Amari as a character was fantastic. I just think this world has so much to offer. And literally, if anybody messes with Amari, I would kill for her. So I think that is pretty much self-explanatory for me. I am incredibly protective over Amari. I love the book. I love the story. I love everything that it did and everything that it has set out to do. And I cannot wait for book number 2, which comes out this year. Anyways, so we've got ACOMAF, A Court of Mist and Fury. Regardless of when I read this book, I think my opinion still remains the same, and I would kill for her. I would kill for ACOMAF. Now, when I was in high school, I was very avidly reading when I was between 8th and 9th grade. Still kind of read when I was in sophomore, junior, and senior year of high school. However, I didn't read as much as I used to when I was younger, and the one series that really did it for me at the time, it's kind of like a nostalgic favorite, is the A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Ms. Mast. Sarah Janet just knows how to do it every time for me, and I think particularly with ACOMAF, I just think that it goes into a completely, it almost goes on a tangent. It goes and does its own thing. The character development is fantastic. The reveals, the plot twists, everything constantly gets a reaction out of me, which is probably the best thing you could do as an author. So followed by ACOMAF, we've got ACOWAR. And while there are some really strong moments in here, a lot of it just falls short. There seems to be a lot of plot holes in this one, and also just a lot of things like, Ms. Yes, just let people die. Just let people die. If they die, they stay dead, okay? Thank you very much. So, did we need this? Is the question. Did we need certain people to survive this? The answer is no. The novella, A Court of Frost and Starlight. I know where this is going immediately. They tried, if anything. I don't know originally if the novellas were planned, but I do know that A Court of Silver Flames was supposed to be in the works and it was supposed to come out, but given delays, whether in writing or editing or whatever it was, Bloomsbury basically went, well, Sarah Dannett, if your book is not ready, at least give us something because you're under contract and we need to release something. And so A Court of Frost and Starlight came about. It is literally a Hallmark special. It is nothing special and it felt like it was ghostwritten. A Court of Silver Flames, which I read. As soon as it came out, it got here, binged it, read it, loved it, sobbed my eyes out. However, can I bring myself to put this beside Aquamoth? I don't know. Like, my first instinct is to go Piquito. Like, I'd smooch the hell out of this book. Journey is incredible. It feels so independent yet connected to the main storyline of ACOTAR. I loved seeing Nesta's development in this one. A Dark and Hollow Star by Ashley Shuttleworth. Now, this one's a special one. This was literally the first book, the very first book that we read with Le Fantasme, which is my book club with Liv on Patreon, which is super exciting, which self-plug if you want to join us. The link is always down below. This book is good. This book is enjoyable. Is it fantastic? Is it the best thing I've ever read? No, by any means, no. This feels very City of Bones like. My favorite thing about this book was how the Fae were portrayed exactly as they were. This is subject to change. This is literally set up for the next book. This is a bunch of exposition, a lot of world building, and you just really get to meet the characters. The audiobook for this was also really, really good. Okay, A Dowry of Blood is next, and I know this is straight up going and I'd kill for you. Very easy position for me. I would literally kill for Constanta, and I think that needs no explanation if you read this book. This is a Wives of Dracula retelling. You've heard me talk about this probably like a million times. Literally, this woman gets done dirty so many times, and the primary subject of this book is literally the toxic cycles of abuse against women. And if that is not all you need to know why I'd kill for this woman, then I don't know what to tell you. It was such an empowering yet heartbreaking story, and I really like all of the subversions. I love how it was polyamorous, and I love how, again, it didn't seem like a hopeless story. Ooh! A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. And I would literally kill for this book. I would kill for Matthew. I would kill for Diana. I would kill for Diana's aunt. I would kill just for everything and everyone in this book. I constantly find myself saying Deborah Harkness just did an absolute stellar job at making me care for things that I never thought I'd care for. Quite literally, history and science are both, well, they were some of my best subjects in school, but coming out of it as somebody who is a makeup artist and does YouTube for a living, what am I here to talk about if anything but science and history? And so she really made me care for those things, and I think the way that they were incorporated into the story and into the world building were just masterfully done. And I think this book reminded me of how much I love witch vampire stories. Ooh. People won't hate me for this. I have A Darker Shade of Magic by Ms. B.E. Schwab. You guys know I love Issa and I love Addie LaRue, and I'm saying that so y'all don't hate me. A Darker Shade of Magic? She messy, okay? Ooh, she messy. I will say, very easy to read, very easy book to just let yourself go with. However, the magic system in this book to me just didn't really feel intricate at all, and this is supposed to be adult fantasy. By all intents and purposes, does not need to be an incredibly, it doesn't need to be Sanderson level intricate. It doesn't need to be Shannon Maguire interesting. However, all I ask is for a magic system that feels substantial, that is good, that is interesting, that keeps me hooked throughout the entirety of the story, and characters that are actually compelling. I believe I have a vlog where I talked about A Darker Shade of Magic pretty in depth because I read this way back in 2021, like March, I'd say, of last year. And this book, the romance came out of nowhere. It was incredibly insta-lovey. I was incredibly annoyed. The characters that I was interested in were barely in the story, and everything else just kind of fell flat for me. So Darker Shade, not for me. Gathering of Shadows, though, was slightly better better than A Darker Shade of Magic, which is why I'm putting it in They Tried, if anything. They did try, VE Shop tried. Alucard was honestly my favorite character in the second one, literally the character that I cared the most about. Hel and Lila's relationship in this one, it just further solidified how it made no sense to me, how I saw no chemistry, and how much I didn't care for these people. Okay, Chain of Iron by Miss Cassandra Clare. I'm gonna put this in Piquito. Okay, I'm gonna put this in Piquito because it was a sexy book, it was good. I realistically fell in love with fantasy even more when I first read the Mortal Instrument series as it was coming out when I was in middle school, and I absolutely adored every second of it. However, what seems to happen with Cassandra Clare that is very interesting, that again could go either of two ways, either in Piquito or did we need this, is that she has a formula and she does the same thing in every book. Her characters are literally copy and pasted in every single narrative. Literally all of the Herondales are the same, all of the main characters are arguably the same. I liked this one, I like this series more just because Cordelia really does seem to have a higher sense of individuality, which I personally really like, and the era in which this is set in has been incredibly exciting. The ending was really, really good. Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Miss Laini Taylor is next. Now, the only reason why I'm placing this here is because I think I read this at the wrong time. Now, this was one of my Patreon book club picks for last year, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It was a really enjoyable book. I just think it was very just like old school YA. If I had read this when I was actually in high school, I think I would have literally fallen in love with this, would kill for it. But given the fact that I read this last year and I feel like I've seen the same tropes over and over again at this point, I just don't think it really did anything special. What I will say is incredibly interesting to me as a trope or as a narrative follow, I guess, is angels and demons. I love that in fantasy books. Brimstone was literally fantastic. So we get a bunch of really cool characters, but when it came to the actual plot twist, it was incredibly predictable, and at the very end you're just left with like, really? Is that all we did? So did we really need this? Could have been better, to be quite honest. Now we have got Illuminae and Gemina. Illuminae was a really great book. I'm literally gonna put it in Piquito because I gave this book 5 stars when I read it. It was a really fantastic narrative. Love the villain? Can we call it a villain? I liked the villain in the story. I think it was incredibly interesting to see. It was kind of, I guess now everybody's gonna compare it to this, but it was kind of like the Thanos situation where, is it right? No. Do you understand where they're coming from? Yes. And I think that's exactly what this book is. And I think the cast of characters was incredibly dynamic and it really just called for attention, and it was incredibly engaging. The audiobook for this was great. I liked the multimedia format that the book has. So overall, I think Illuminae was a stellar book, literally fantastic. But when it comes to Gemina, she as messy as it can get. I did not care for Gemina at all. I was so disappointed in the narrative, and here is where Mr. Kristoff's history kind of comes in. A lot of his books, from what I have heard, tend to really play out the sexualization of underage girls, of women. Gemina was literally that. The main character of Gemina is in a relationship with what I believe is a slightly older person, and by older I mean just a few years older, but I do remember it being like, ooh, do you want to wear that nice dress that I love how it looks on your body? And I was just highly uncomfortable listening to that on audio and listening how a girl who was 17 years old or around that age was being put in this position of your body is what makes you. I hated that. I also did not care a single flying fuck about the plot in this book. It was just such a weak follow-up to Illuminae, in my opinion. We have Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant, and I freaking love this book. Definitely gonna put that into Piquito. I absolutely loved this. It just solidified why I'm so scared of the sea. Like between this and Titanic, I'm never going on a cruise. I'm not stepping on a cruise. I'm not going in there. I loved this. It is literally an exploration of human evolution, and it is all done through a quest set out at sea to find out what happened with a crew that got lost in the midst of filming a documentary about the Mariana Trench. And it is the scariest, spookiest thing you'll find at sea. I love that this is a crossover of sci-fi and horror, and it was honestly done perfectly in my opinion, and I was very scared. I did not want that again. Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I am going to put this in I'd kill for you. Although this book was not a 5-star for me, I would kill for Clara. And I think that's what this comes down to. Clara is the most doe-eyed, wide-eyed, innocent, naive, perfect AI to see the world from. She sees the world in such a childlike way, but with such love and enthusiasm, and she just wants to learn about humans and what drives humans and why humans behave the way that they do and what human reaction really is and how it comes about. And you truly just have such an empathetic literal robot, which at times seems to be so much more empathetic than a human being itself. So I loved her as the narrator of the story, and I think it was a fantastic exploration of humanity. We've got Kingdom of Ash by Miss Sarah Janet. I would kill for her. Is it my favorite Throne of Glass book? No. And I think this book, as opposed to ACOTAR, it has a very well-earned ending. After every trial and tribulation and trauma and obstacle and tear and abuse and just everything in between, the characters really got the ending that they deserve. And I don't think I could have wished for anything more out of the conclusion of the series. And I just love how she never ignores the topic of mental health in this space. And she does it in a way that makes sense to her characters, which I really personally enjoy and just have a pleasant time reading. Oh, I was dreading this moment. Lost in the Neverwoods by Aiden Thomas. This was one of my most anticipated releases of last year, and I also read this with the Citadel, and I thought I was gonna have the best time of my life. I thought I was thoroughly going to love and enjoy this book, and it ended up being the exact opposite. Now, I constantly go back and forth with, do I really like retellings? Do I hate retellings? Where do I stand with retellings? And this was a case of, where is the retelling? I personally didn't see the charm that Aiden Thomas had in Cemetery Boys, which I had read previous to this, and I was very bummed about that. Plot twists in this book didn't really even make sense to me. The development wasn't even there. It wasn't it for me. We have Lore by Alexandra Bracken, and my take on this, did we need this? Now, I did like this book also. Let me just preface by saying that I really liked this book. I think it definitely gave me DC Comics vibes in the beginning of the book. I think a lot of mythology elements were really interesting in the way that it was executed. It was interesting. I just think we reach a certain point in the narrative where it gets really messy and where things just start happening out of nowhere, and it almost felt like the author was pulling shit out of their ass and going, woo, well, you better take that and that and that. And the ending of this as well was like so unearned and unwarranted and everything. I did not like the ending of this at all. A lot of parts about this book also felt very plot convenient, but I think overall there were elements of this book that I really enjoyed and that I think were really strong. When I weigh them out, I think it fits right in the middle of, like, it had some really great parts and some really not so great parts. It's Middle Game by Shannon McGuire, and we already know where this is going. Also, I just had to sing the song. However, obviously it had to go in the top tier. I would literally kill for Roger and Dodger. They don't need any help. First of all, they do not need my help. If anything, I literally just want to protect these siblings till the end of times, which they may just bring out themselves. Also reading this with the Citadel just because I want to reread it because it was that good, and I just had a great time with it. I just don't know what else to say about this book beside the establishment of the theme itself, which is humans with powers and what that does to people, or what that does to the people around them, was so just fantastic. It was so intriguing to see the navigation of this particular subject in this capacity. It was so well researched to what it seems like. I'm not a science person, I don't know. However, it seems very well researched, the way that everything connects at the end, the plot twist, and the sense of dread really of, are these twins ever actually gonna do it? You know, are they gonna beat all the odds, become gods? Are they gonna take over the world, end the world? Like, what's gonna happen with them? However, Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares, I would definitely kill for Strange. I would kill for Laszlo. I would kill for the whole book, for the set of characters. I freaking loved this. It was lyrical. The world building was phenomenal. The world building was phenomenal. It was the first book after I created the Citadel. Look, the Citadel. It was the first book after I created the Citadel that I'd read about that had a Citadel. And so it was just like very special at the time. And it was also coincidentally enough. So when I do readathons, a lot of the time I'm just trying to rush through books and finish books, which is just don't do it, kids. I try and read as fast as possible. And for this one, I believe this was also my first 48-hour readathon. It was the very first time that I started reading a book. And I was like, if it takes me longer than a day, well, fuck it. I'm just gonna finish it when I finish it. And I think at the time I also needed to hear a lot of things about feelings of inadequacy and like imposter syndrome. So I particularly really enjoyed it. I think the writing was stunning. It really just sucks you into the world because it's also magical and whimsical that it's like you just want to be in the Citadel. I know you do. These jokes today, Mel. What's happening? I'm gonna go ahead with Muse. Now, several times I've said like, oh, like the sequel's even better. But in this case, when I look at the difference between Strange and Muse, the lyrical aspect was so much more present in Strange at several different times that I personally love that about it even more. In terms of execution, I think Muse, as opposed to Strange, was so much more jam-packed with action and resolution rather than anything, and just a lot of great plot twists as well. Is it at the same level as Strange? I mean, it is technically in terms of a rating, but when I look at the grand scheme of things, I'm like, I still like Strange better. Ninth House by Lee Bardugo is going into Piquito. I loved this book as well. I love Alex Stern as a protagonist. I think when I think of Dark Academia, I think of something like this. It's something very twisted. It's something very gory. It's something that is really not pretty. It's a narrative where things just get fucked up real quick and where characters are being done wrong at every single turn. This is the epitome of what I think Dark Academia feels like. It literally explores secret societies. And although it is set at Yale, which I know is a lot of people's critique about this book, that yes, it's set in Yale, but like she never really goes to classes. And I'm like, does she really have to though? Because the whole purpose of Dark Academia is exploring the intricacies of the darkness of the academia. So when I think of that, I think of the 7 secret societies in Yale, and that literally was thoroughly explored in this novel. One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. Now, you guys know me. I loved Red, White, and Royal Blue. One Last Stop was one of my most anticipated releases for last year. I was super excited for the element of time traveling and sci-fi set in the contemporary world and having a sapphic romance. I was excited for all of it, especially seeing the incoming reviews for the first round of arcs that went out. Everybody was raving about this book and I was like, fuck yes, sapphics win, everything's gonna be fantastic, love all of it. And then I read it. And I'm just convinced at this point that Casey McQuiston should steer clear of writing POCs because it's messy. I have the same argument for Red, White, and Royal Blue. And I feel like sadly, a lot of authors tend to go that route. For people who are not POC, it's very easy to go the stereotypical route. You know, Latinos, everybody needs to eat tortillas and beans, and that's just so fucking dumb. One Last Stop is the same thing. It's very stereotypically white savior saves Asian girl, and everything Asian girl does revolves around very white hero. I don't love that. I don't love that the ultimate salvation of this character needed to end up being so intrinsically connected to this girl. Like it rubbed me the wrong way. The romance was fantastic. Like literally the romance aspect of this book was so good, but it also felt in a way like unrequited. I never know how to say that word, please forgive me. But it almost feels like one-sided love. It feels like one of the girls is more into the girl than the other. And I don't know. The book was just messy, you guys. Okay, moving on to lighter, greater subjects. Yay. We've got Our Violent Ends by Chloe Gong. And you already know I would literally kill for Juliet and Roma. Do they need any help in that regard? Absolutely fucking no. Would I still try and get in on the action? Absolutely yes. I love Chloe Gong's writing. I love how this is a cross between magical realism, fantasy, and historical fiction. I love how she constantly brings up these topics about race and racism, colonialism, and it was honestly fantastic in this landscape. And I love how she ended up including the Romeo and Juliet aspect of it. It made the story even more intricate, even more interesting. I love the vicious cycle of enemies to lovers, which I always say she did it incredibly well, where it's it's a constant back and forth of I love you and I hate you. Ooh, okay, we've got Pages & Co. by Anna James, which I absolutely love. Literally one of my favorite middle grades. Okay, no, I wouldn't kill for it. So Pages & Co. is a really good middle grade. I constantly say this. I love how magical it is. I love how the main subject of the book is books and love for books and love for book characters. And I think it's almost like a childlike exploration of people who want to like self-insert themselves in books almost. I remember when I was super young and I would read and I would be like, oh my god, I'd love to be in the New York Institute of the Shadowhunter world. And I was just like, you kind of want to be in those worlds and you want to meet those characters and you want to be friends with those characters. And I think that's what Pages & Co. does. Tilly literally ends up being friends with Alice in Wonderland and Anne of Green Gables. That's incredibly exciting to read about. It's literally almost kind of like putting yourself in the shoes of the character and just, diving into the world. It was super exciting. I loved it. The plot twist was really freaking good. Literally did not see it coming at all. Then we've got number 2, which is Pages & Co. and Tilly and the Lost Fairy Tales, I think it is. And this one I'm gonna put in Did We Need This? It was a definite step down from the first book, which was so stellar. It was so good. And I just didn't think that the second one was up to par with book 1. It was not as interesting. Maybe it's because we already kind of knew the world building of it all. You take that away from the second one and what's there to be excited about now. And sadly, the quest adventure in the second one, again, just wasn't as exciting as book 1. I have Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and I'm definitely gonna put this in Piquito. This was a phenomenal sci-fi. It genuinely makes me so excited to read The Martian because I've never read that either. Project Hail Mary though, and I am going to assume that The Martian has a very similar tone based on what I've heard, but it manages to combine the best elements of mental health and then comedy and then science in such a unique writing voice too. And I love the quest in this one. I love the relationship that Rocky and Ryland end up developing in this. Paola Santiago and the River of Tears is an interesting one. I would put it at Piquito, but I can't. And the only reason why it constantly like fluctuates back and forth for me between Piquito and like Did We Need This is the fact that we do need this. In middle grade, we definitely do need more POC representation. I read this book and I found myself going, if only I had this when I was younger. If only I had this when I was 11, 12 years old and I got to read about an 11-year-old Latina girl literally beating La Llorona. Like, I would have loved to read that when I was younger, not only to feel reassured that La Llorona was not gonna come and eat me every day, but also just for the simple fact that representation matters. It's important. Paola's attitude in this book is what kind of rubs me off the wrong way. She was a very entitled, almost selfish, possessive kid, and I constantly had an issue with the way that she behaved in this book. And I also think that the ending was incredibly rushed and it was kind of hard to remember exactly what the resolution had been a month after I read the book. And so while I do think that the subject matter and the representation aspect of this book is immensely important, I think the execution of it could have been altered. Skyward by Brandy Sandy. I am going to put this in Piquito. Not top tier, but up there. I talk about Skyward all the fucking time. I really need to stop. Love Spencer. It was the first sci-fi that I read, and I just kept imagining the wildest, craziest shit in my head, and it just seemed to work. I was listening to sci-fi music as I was reading the book. It just elevated the experience. It was so action-packed in classic Brandy Sandy fashion. He spares no one. It is emotional. You get invested. The world is interesting. The plot twists are fascinating. It was a fantastic time. However, Starsight was not as good as Skyward, so I am gonna put that in Did We Need This? Execution-wise, it was interesting, but when you take away the supporting cast of characters that we fell in love with in Skyward, it kind of takes away a little bit of the charm. I still do think that Skyward was as strong as it was, not only because of Spensa, but because of the people surrounding her. And again, when you take away that factor, it takes away a little bit of its charm. Mr. Lightning Thief, Percy Jackson by Rick Riordan. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just tier rank both of these in I'd kill for you. I'd kill for the whole cast of characters. Percy, Annabeth, Grover, for Tyson, for Chiron, for every single body in this story, except for Clarissa. I will not kill for her, but everybody else I would kill for. I loved my reread of this. It's just such an endearing cast of characters. Reminds me why I fell so in love with mythology when I was younger. reader, what made me keep reading mythology books, what made me read every single article, wiki I could find at the time with more mythology info. I just felt so connected to this. I don't know why. I don't know why. Ever since I was young, I was just obsessed with the idea of like deities and gods and all that. And this book just kind of solidified that. I love how ADHD positive it is. It's almost like even if you have this, it does not make you different. It does not make you less than people. You are equally as special, equally as unique. You can do the best equal things, if not greater. And I just love that message for kids because it's so empowering. Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. I'm going to put in Piquito. That feels right. That actually feels very, very right. This is a retelling that I really enjoyed. It is a retelling of Mulan, and it meets Project Runway. We've got a Project Runway-esque competition, but it's all very magical and mystical. The magic in this was just so whimsical and beautiful. The romance even was something that I really, really enjoyed. I just think where the book falls apart for me a little bit is when they go on the quest to get this done, but everything before and after that was incredibly exciting. However, that quest just, there were really exciting parts and there were really just random parts that I was just like, what's happening? The Beautiful and the Damned. So The Beautiful is definitely Piquito for me. I really enjoyed this book. It was super fast to read, first of all. Literally read it in one sitting, and I quite enjoyed it. I think what I liked most of all was the vibes from the originals, which is the spin-off show to the Vampire Diaries. It gave me very much those vibes, very much the vibes of the flashbacks of 1864 and the Vampire Diaries. I just very much enjoyed just reminiscing about that era almost. I like the sense of mystery in this one as well, where you almost know something that she doesn't know, that there are vampires, that there are werewolves, that there are witches, that there's all of this supernatural world. She doesn't know all of that. We personally know all of that, or it's insinuated so that we know all of that. And that element of mystery, of intrigue was just so good. The romance was super tense. It did what it had to do. The chemistry was fantastic. And I just think everything flowed so nicely in this one. I genuinely really enjoyed it. The Damned though, she's messy. The Damned is so freaking messy. And this is the perfect example of, or at least that's what it seems like, of an author not knowing what they want to do with a story before they started. These two novels feel like completely different worlds, completely different settings, because they are completely different writing style. Just everything felt so vastly different in the second one, where the first one is very much focused on witches and vampires and werewolves. In the second one, we get this expansion of the world where now you get fae, and now you get all of these different things that I would have never thought would come up in this book, where I did not want that in this series because that's not what I signed up for. The Bone Shard Daughter. She's so messy, it's unreal. And I almost wonder all the time, like literally all the time, I wonder if I read the same book that other people read. First of all, and maybe this is where I would have benefited from not reading a synopsis. However, I had to read a synopsis because this was a book club pick. I read the synopsis, and the synopsis led me to think that this was going to be a completely different narrative than what I got. And I say that because usually when you read the synopsis for high fantasy books, you kind of get the sense of like multi-cast of characters, multi-POV, such a big conflict, even greater than you can imagine. This seems like such a close quarter, let's follow one character and her narrative sort of synopsis, that when I entered the narrative and got 3 more POVs, and 3 more POVs that completely overshadowed what was happening with the main character, I also didn't like the world building for this one at all. It made no sense to me, and I think the things that yelled being so important and that literally controlled the entirety of the nation were left unexplained. They kept repeating this one term, which I've already forgotten. They kept repeating this one term over and over and over and over and over again, and not once was it explained as to what it was. Maybe it's explained in book 2. Don't have the patience to go there to find out. Next up, we have The Bone Season. I'm gonna put this in Piquito. I definitely have to reread this book before I carry out with the series because I feel like I've forgotten a lot of details, but this book was so interesting. The clairvoyancy part of this was so intricate and interesting. The whole underground crime underbelly of London was so interesting. This whole other species which seemingly wants to kill the other people. The whole conflict of this book was so interesting. The romance part of this was something that I was anticipating but not expecting, if that makes sense. And when it did happen, it was so freaking good. Like the chemistry, the tension, everything was so freaking good. I just had a really good time reading this, and I really want to re-experience this year so that I can carry out with the series and kind of get to where we're at right now. But it was a really good first installment. It was really freaking fantastic. The Diviners by Libba Bray is another one that I'm gonna put under Piquito. I've been putting off this book for like almost a decade, okay? When I think about a horror, thriller, paranormal narrative in a YA setting, this is the excellency that everybody should be carrying out. I love how genuinely spooky this book was. I genuinely felt like a demon was gonna come out of my bathroom and be like, hi bitch, I'm here to get you. I loved Evie as the main character. She was so sassy and so classy, but so raunchy all at the same time. I loved Sam as the love interest. He literally screams Bucky Barnes vibes all the freaking way, where he like calls her like doll because it's set in the 20s, so it all just very much lines up to that, you know, time period and sort of chivalry. I would also kill for Mistborn. I didn't think it was gonna go up there. My hand just did something, and you can't blame me, because I was out of control. I would kill for Kelsier, even though he was the most annoying person ever. I would kill for Vin. I would love to join this crew too. It's like a very fucking badass crew. The magic system in Mistborn is so freaking good. I want to push and pull some metal. I want to push and pull too. The house in the Cerulean say. I'm going to put this in Did We Need This? Here's my thing. I love the book. I love the tone of it. It balances itself out. It's comedic where it needs to be, but then it's also very just sad and depressing where it needs to be, given the life that the main character leads. And so I love how self-aware it is and how much it tries to, again, not make it seem like a hopeless case. I love the trope of found family. It's very well thoroughly done in this book. However, there was a certain point when it was kind of reaching its climax and the resolution that I was just like, I'm not here for that. So I just think like the first 2/3 of the book were really strong, and the very, very end was also fantastic. But again, when it came to the climax resolution, I was kind of like underwhelmed. Thunderhead by Neil Schustermans. I will put this in I'd Kill for You. When I think of Scythe as a trilogy, which I still have yet to finish, the most intricate, interesting element of this has always been the Thunderhead. The thing that rules so omnisciently over everybody, that rules itself supreme, but is still so fair. It is so interesting to me. The fact that we get a whole book where we get to explore the Thunderhead, where instead of getting journal entries from the Scythes, we instead get the thought process of the Thunderhead, was so good to read from. But I think it's truly the exploration of humanity and crime and what it means to be right or wrong, or what it means to be wrong in doing a right action, if that makes sense. I don't know. This book, just the lines between morality are always so blurred in this one, but it was really good. It was really freaking good. The Los Angeles Baby Murder Cases. Now, I loved this book, but did we need this? Did we though? I think you kind of get what you expect if you've read Death Note, and I definitely would say read Death Note first, or watch it first and then read this, and kind of, you know, read it in that order. I don't know how much I would recommend people read this first, even though it does take place before the events of Death Note. It's L being a smartass at all times and kind of knowing what things are gonna happen before they happen, and it's always really insane but good to see his thought process and to see how he reaches those conclusions. I'm bumping down Akuma before I carry on. The Last Wish, which is the first set of novellas for The Witcher. I'm gonna put this in I'd Kill for You, and I literally would. I was not expecting this at all. The last thing I was expecting out of this was to get some sort of fairy tale retellings, and I love Geralt of Rivia. I love how strongly he believes in his moral code and how he strictly sticks to monsters and evil creatures, and his companion is also incredibly funny and just incredibly loyal, which I love, and everything about it just worked out for me. Priory of the Orange Tree tried. It really did. It really tried. The Sapphic Romance really won in this one because I was fully there for them. I loved them. I wanted them to literally like burn the world and then be the only two people alive. That's the vibe that it gave me, and I wanted it. I just wanted them to be okay at the end. That was truly what I was most invested in. However, we have certain POVs that I really just were so weak, in my opinion, made no sense as to why they were there, and they could have been cut out and the book could have been shorter, to be quite honest. This book could have also also benefited from being two different books and a duology instead of a standalone. The dragons in this one are there, but are they really there? Because I don't think so. When we did the live show for this book because this was also a book club pick for Le Fantasma, I literally took over this live show and I went on a whole ass rant about this ending because it felt like I was reading a 600 page, like literally ascend into conflict, and then nothing happened. The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson also tried. I really also wanted to love The Space Between Worlds. It was literally one of the books that I was so excited about reading last year, and I was so just underwhelmed as well. And I think it mostly came down to the plot twists and the world building, which, albeit very interesting, it constantly fell short for me. I just think I had created a certain expectation of how this book was gonna go, and I think this is wholly my fault personally, where I had this very clear vision of what I guess the book should have done, which is the dumbest thing ever, but alas, it's kind of the hole that I put myself in. I did not get any of that. It took a completely different route. I was so confused. I was just, again, so underwhelmed and just sitting there being like, what is even happening at this point? I was very confused by the direction that the book took. However, I think if I would have known barely anything about it, or if I hadn't heard so many people hype this up at the time, maybe I would have liked this slightly more, but I just think I just induced this sort of incredible excitement upon myself. The Witch is Heart by Genevieve Gornichek. I didn't love this book, but I'm gonna put this on Did We Need This? And I think this book had a few things going for it. If you're not familiar with Norse mythology, it's got something going for it. You're gonna learn a lot. It's gonna be so interesting. It's gonna be weird if you've never heard about Loki and his personal story. The writing style was also really good, especially if you listen to the audiobook. It really just feels like you're sitting at a campfire and somebody's telling you a story, and it feels very good. This retelling is not a retelling. Like, there is no retold part to this. Most of this was so accurate to the original mythos that it's hard to distinguish where it was its own thing and where it was just regurgitating what the mythos already tells you. The Way of Kings by Brandy Standing goes into I'd kill for you. I love this book with my whole heart and soul. We've been new, we know this, and I can't wait to finish Words of Radiance. It just did everything right for me. The world for Way of Kings, first of all, is so big and vast and so interesting because it really is. There are a lot of things that are not necessarily explicitly explained in the way that Final Empire does. However, I think that's the charm of Way of Kings, is the fact that it's going to be a 10-book series and it's all just so mystical and magical and it's so grand. You're literally talking about people possessing godlike powers, just enhancing themselves through armors and swords, and it's so just out of this world, quite literally, and the commentary on religion as always is fantastic. The chapter starters, you guys know this, were driving me insane because I was like, fuck is writing this. It was just all so freaking good, and I would die for Kaladin, and I would kill for Kaladin. I think a lot of people deserve to be killed in honor of Kaladin. Vengeful tried. It tried to do something. It used one of the tropes that I'm always so in love with, which is the game of cat and mouse, but I just don't think it added anything relevant to what we already saw in Vicious. I would much rather think of Vicious as a standalone with an open ending rather than think of Vengeful as a follow-up, to be quite honest. Wicked Fox, I'd kill for you. Vicious Spirit, I'd kill for you. I'd kill for the whole series. I really would love this to be a whole series, to be quite honest with you. Kat Cho writes Korean mythology so beautifully. It is so, you know what took me by surprise about this book, about both of them really, is the fact that while yes, she establishes this incredible world, which is, you know, set in the contemporary world, but this whole mythos talk in such a beautiful way. But within that mythos, she has her own personal familial dynamics and explorations of just so many topics about individuality, about your view of the world, about your sense of morality, about your sense of duty. It's just all so phenomenal. And I loved Wicked Fox, honestly. Seeing the power dynamics and the familial dynamics between Mi Young and her mom was literally just, it was so much to unpack, but it was honestly so fantastic. Where Dreams Descend. It also tried. See, I felt no chemistry between the characters in this one. I did not like the world building because there virtually wasn't any that made sense. It was like the whole world and the whole plot was revolving around the main character and around how great she was, was she that great? really? And when you have those pitches, which is Greatest Showman means Phantom of the Opera, and then the second one, which I'm so scared for the people because I'm not gonna read it because I don't want that ruined. Phantom of the Opera meets Hadestown. That's a whole lot of shoe to fill, and it was not filled. Okay, this was like a kid standing in his father's shoes and them just flopping because they're so big. That's what this book felt like. It was so sad when I didn't like this. And last but not least, we've got Witches Steeped in Gold by Cheyenne Smart, and she was messy. I think it was a similar case of the chemistry between the characters that were supposed to have romance was not really present for me. It felt very much forced. It almost felt like what I've mentioned in the past of authors who write YA using romance as a smokescreen to hide the fact that everything else is weak. This is kind of what it felt like, and while the world itself was very interesting, I read this after Mistborn, and it has a similar premise of metals being the primary source of magic in this world. It was nowhere near as intricate as I feel it should have been for this particular narrative, and it was very easy also to confuse the voice of the characters. The only way that I could tell who was talking was by the side characters, and that's just hearing that just sounds inherently wrong. And so unfortunately it ended up being a miss for me. Pretty happy with this, I think. Am I happy with this? I feel like I could move something, I just don't know. I'm also gonna move the Lightning Thief down to Piquito, just because I enjoyed Sea of Monsters more than I enjoyed the Lightning Thief when I did read it. Everything else is staying as is. Okay, perfect. So yes, you guys, that is my tier rank for my fantasy/sci-fi books that I read last year. That was such a long sentence, Mel. I could have made that sentence like half the size that it actually was, but I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a massive thumbs up down below. Let me know, what were your favorite books of the year? Would you rank any of these differently? Let a girl know. Let a girl know what you think of this tier rank. I feel like we're pretty much, I think this is pretty solid, but if you have any thoughts at all, positive, negative, or just questions or thoughts or anything, leave them down in the comments for me so that we can chat about all of these books that were read last year. Don't forget to subscribe down below if you haven't done so already. I am constantly uploading videos I am sure you do not want to miss, and if you want to support the channel further, I do have the Patreon. We call ourselves the Citadel, and you can always join us at the link down below. I also, alongside that, leave all of my socials linked down below in case you guys want to find me anywhere else. Yes, I love you guys so much, and I shall see you on the next one. Bye guys.